The knock at the door wasn't friendly. It wasn't the polite, "Can I borrow some sugar?" kind of knock. No, this was sharp, deliberate, and entitled. The kind of knock you'd expect from someone who thought they owned the place, or at least believed they should. 008. I stood in the hallway staring at the door like it might bite. Something about that knock felt like a warning, but then again, when had my ex-wife Grace ever been subtle? 014. I opened the door, and there she was, Grace, dressed in designer clothes she likely couldn't afford, sunglasses perched on her head like she was auditioning for a reality show no one asked for. Beside her stood Daniel, the man she left me for, the man she married after me, 026. His smirk made my fists itch. He didn't say a word, just gave me a once-over like I was something he'd stepped in. 032. Grace wasted no time. "Well, Thomas, aren't you going to invite us in?" 036. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Depends. Did you bring?" "A gift? That's usually what guests do." 041. Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then she flipped the charm switch back on. "We're not here for pleasantries. We're here to discuss business." 047. Daniel finally spoke, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Your father's estate. We believe we have some rightful claims. It's only fair we settle this like adults." 054. Rightful claims. I couldn't help but laugh. "You've got to be kidding. Grace, you signed the divorce papers. You walked away. Now you think you're entitled to my father's estate?" 103. Grace stepped forward, her perfume clouding the air between us. "Thomas, don't be unreasonable. You know how close I was to your father. He adored me." 110. "Yeah, until he didn't," I shot back. "Don't rewrite history just because you're after a payday." 114. Daniel's smirk widened, somehow. "Listen, Tom." 116. "It's Thomas," I corrected. "Only my friends call me Tom, and last I checked, you weren't one of them." 121. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he pressed on. "This house is worth millions. Grace was part of this family for years. As her husband, I think it's only right we talk about what portion of the estate belongs to her, and by extension, to us." 132. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Almost. "You're not getting a cent," I said flatly. 136 before. I could say anything more colorful. Another voice cut in behind me. "Well, this is a fascinating conversation," said Eleanor, stepping into view. We taped 3. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other. Her calm, confident smile was the kind that could level armies. 147. "Thomas, aren't you going to introduce me?" 150. Grace's expression cracked. Daniel's smirk, now unsure, didn't. 154. "And you are?" he asked. 156. "Eleanor Price," she replied smoothly. "Thomas's attorney. And you must be Daniel, the man under the impression he can waltz in and lay claim to something that isn't his." 204. "Attorney?" Grace repeated, her poise slipping. "Why would Thomas need—" 207. "Because unlike some people, I like to be prepared," I said, stepping aside to let Eleanor in. "And I had a feeling you'd pull something like this." 212. Eleanor opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Your timing is impeccable," she said to Grace and Daniel. "Thomas and I were just going over the details of Mr. Harrison's will, the one that clearly outlines who does and doesn't have a legal claim." 225. Color drained from Grace's face. Daniel puffed up like a rooster. "This isn't over," he said. "You can play the legal game all you want, but we have rights. We'll see you in court." 234. Eleanor smiled like a shark. "Oh, I'm counting on it." 2:37. Grace tugged on Daniel's arm. "Let's go," she hissed. As they stormed down the driveway, Daniel threw one last glare over his shoulder. "This isn't the end, Thomas." 2:45. "Looking forward to it," I called back, shutting the door behind them. Grace's face turned red as her own words echoed through the silent courtroom. The footage was damning, clear, concise, and undeniable. Her carefully curated image crumbled before the judge, the jury, and the audience. Daniel slumped in his seat, burying his face in his hands. There was no spin left, no explanation that could dig them out of the hole they had gleefully dug. The judge looked up, his expression stony. "I've seen enough." Grace's attorney made a last-ditch attempt. "Your Honor, if I may—" "You may not," the judge interrupted, his voice firm. "This court finds compelling evidence of fraud, coercion, and a blatant attempt to manipulate the decedent's final wishes. The no contest clause is hereby enforced. Grace Langford and Daniel Keene are disqualified from receiving any portion of the estate." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room as the gavel came down. Eleanor turned to me, victorious but measured. That was just phase 1. I exhaled slowly, the weight of years of betrayal finally shifting off my chest. "What happens? To them now?" She gathered her notes. "Perjury, fraud, attempted coercion. The DA will be reviewing everything, and the civil suits you're entitled to file, we'll be pursuing those too." Across the aisle, Grace looked at me one last time, her eyes not pleading, but hateful. She knew she'd lost. Not just the money, not just the estate. She'd lost the war she started. I stood nodding to Eleanor. "Let's finish what my father started. Would you like this turned into a polished short story or screenplay format?" 24:56. White-knuckled, Daniel clenched his jaw as murmurs rippled through the courtroom. 25:02. The judge silenced the crowd with a sharp bang of his gavel. "Do you deny this is your voice, Mrs. Grace Mitchell?" Eleanor asked, her tone slicing through the silence. 25:07. Grace hesitated, her voice trembling. It's taken out of context." 25:14. Eleanor didn't flinch. "Would you like more context? We have hours of recordings." 25:22. The room erupted in hushed whispers. The judge's gavel struck again. "Order! Mrs. Mitchell, answer the question." 25:28. Grace glanced at Daniel. He offered nothing. Her gaze turned to her attorney. 25:33. Finally, she slumped in her seat. "No," she muttered. "I don't deny it." 25:39. That single admission sealed their fate. But Eleanor wasn't done. "Your Honor, I'd like to present further evidence of financial fraud by the defendants." 25:47, she held up documents. "These bank statements show that Mrs. Mitchell funneled money from a joint account with Mr. Harrison during their marriage, transferring funds to accounts under her maiden name. Mr. Daniel Mitchell was complicit." 26:04. Daniel shot to his feet. "That's a lie." 26:10. Eleanor calmly slid another document forward. "These records disagree. Mr. Harrison hired private investigators. They tracked every dollar, every meeting. Your lies are all laid bare." 26:23. The judge leaned forward, stern. "Do the defendants have any response?" 26:28. Grace's attorney rose shakily. "Your Honor, my clients respectfully decline to comment at this time." 26:39. The judge nodded. "Then we'll proceed." The room fell quiet, broken only by the scribble of reporters, pens and the judge flipping documents. Grace and Daniel sat rigid, their confidence evaporated. 26:59. Then the prosecutor called me to the stand. As I passed Grace, I caught a flicker of desperation in her eyes. Daniel wouldn't even look at me. 27:07. Please state your name for the court. Thomas Harrison, I replied, voice steady. 27:15. Can you describe your relationship to the defendants? Grace Mitchell is my ex-wife. Daniel Mitchell is her current husband. 27:29. The prosecutor nodded. During your marriage, did you observe any behavior that might indicate financial misconduct by Mrs. Mitchell? 27:35. I paused, steadying myself. Yes, Grace frequently withdrew large sums without explanation. When I asked, she'd brush it off, say it was for the house. 27:55. Did it continue after your divorce? It did. She accessed our joint accounts during proceedings and moved funds into private accounts under her maiden name. 28:06. Objection, her attorney shouted. Speculative and irrelevant. 28:14. The judge dismissed it. Overruled. Continue. 28:20. The prosecutor leaned in. Are you aware of any actions taken by the defendants regarding your late father, Richard Harrison? 28:25. I nodded. They visited often near the end, pretending to care, but were really pressing him for details about his will and estate. 28:45. Gasps swept the courtroom. Grace glared daggers at me. Daniel looked pale. 29. Did your father ever express concerns? He did. My father was a cautious man. He saw through them. He hired investigators and documented everything. 29:12. Can you elaborate? He gathered photos, bank records, and even videos. He wanted his legacy protected. 29:24. The prosecutor turned to the judge. Your Honor, we'd like to submit the surveillance footage. 29:31. The clerk played the video. In the first clip, Grace and Daniel whispered in a hospital hallway. Once the will is read, we'll contest it, Grace said. Daniel, keep pushing him. Remind him how much I've sacrificed. The second showed Daniel handing an envelope to a man in a parking lot. This is Mr. Mitchell bribing a nurse for confidential health records, the prosecutor said. 30:01. Grace buried her face in her hands. Daniel sat frozen, jaw clenched. To 20, the prosecutor turned back to me. What impact has this had on you? 30:25. I drew a breath. Losing my father was hard enough. Watching them exploit his death, it's been infuriating. He built his legacy on integrity. I won't let them destroy that. 30:44. No further questions. As I returned to my seat, Grace's attorney stood to cross-examine, but Grace jumped up. 30:52. This is a sham, she shouted, her voice cracking. Richard was a stubborn old man. This doesn't prove anything. 31:10. The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Mitchell, sit down or be held in contempt. But Grace wasn't done. She pointed at me, shaking. 31:20. You think you've won, Thomas? That you're better than me? You're nothing without your father's money. 31:34. Chaos erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. 31:40. Order! The judge roared. Daniel slouched, head in hands. Grace's attorney tried to calm her, but she shoved him aside. 31:51. You'll regret this, Thomas. Mark my words. 31:57. Officers escorted her out as she screamed, This isn't over! 32:09. The judge declared a recess. Eleanor turned to me, satisfied. That outburst just sealed their fate. 32:17. She lost it, I said, still processing. 32:23. And the jury saw every second of it. After the break, I returned to my seat, Grace's meltdown still fresh in everyone's mind. Daniel hadn't spoken a word. His silence was as loud as her rage. Eleanor leaned toward me. 33:11. There's one last thing your father planned. It's time to play the final card. What is it? I asked. She smiled. You'll see. 33:31. The judge returned. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence, a statement recorded by Mr. Richard Harrison before his passing. 33:43. The room went still. Grace paled. Daniel stared blankly. 33:56. The video played. There was my father, frailer than I remembered, but voice unwavering. 34:13. If you're watching this, then my suspicions have been confirmed. Grace and Daniel attempted to claim a part of my estate through manipulation. To them, I say this: your greed blinded you. This was never about money. It was about values. 34:36. He leaned in. Grace, you deceived my son. Daniel, you exploited the opportunity, but you underestimated us. 34:58. Then his expression softened. To my son, Thomas, I leave not only my estate, but the responsibility to uphold our legacy. I'm proud of you. 35:23. He finished, firm. The truth always comes to light, and when it does, you'll have no one to blame but yourselves. 35:30. The screen went dark. Grace looked like she'd been struck. Daniel sat motionless, broken. 35:46. The prosecutor spoke. Your Honor, we request the court enforce the no contest clause in Mr. Harrison's will. 36:07. Grace's attorney tried to object. The judge raised a hand. Enough. The evidence speaks for itself. 36:13. He turned to them. Your actions were reprehensible. You betrayed trust, manipulated family, and tried to profit from a man's death. The court enforces the no contest clause. 36:27. Bang. Grace and Daniel Mitchell are disqualified from receiving any portion of the Harrison estate. Grace gasped, hand over her mouth. Daniel looked like a man who had lost everything because he had. As the courtroom cleared, Eleanor and I stayed behind. She handed me a sealed envelope. Your father asked me to give you this when it was over. Inside was a letter. Thomas, if you're reading this, it means justice has been served. But this letter isn't about them. It's about you. I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. This fight wasn't just to protect the estate. It was to show you your worth, your strength. In my study's desk drawer, you'll find one final surprise, something to help you move forward. Continue building our legacy. With love, Dad. My hands trembled as I read. Eleanor smiled softly. 37:44. He thought of everything, didn't he? I nodded, too choked up to speak. 37:51. Let's go, I said. I want to see what he left. At the house, I opened the drawer my father had mentioned. Inside was another envelope, this one containing a deed. It was for a parcel of land adjacent to his estate. A note was attached. This is for you, Thomas. I bought it because I knew you'd create something beautiful. Whatever you choose, know that I'll always be with you. I sat back, overwhelmed by the depth of his foresight and love. My father hadn't just left me his estate. He had left me a future, one filled with possibilities and the strength to move forward. That evening, I stood in my father's garden. The weight of the past few weeks began to lift. The roses he had planted swayed gently in the breeze, a reminder of his enduring presence. I remembered his words. The truth always finds its way to the light. And it had. Now it was time to rebuild, not just for myself, but for the legacy he'd entrusted to me. The courtroom had ruled in my favor, but the fallout from Grace and Daniel's betrayal was far from over. The media frenzy was relentless, plastering their downfall across every outlet. Reporters camped outside the estate, hungry for a statement. Eleanor shielded me from the chaos. Keep a low profile, she advised. Let the storm pass. You don't owe anyone your story. She was right. I had nothing to prove. Still, watching Grace and Daniel's public humiliation unfold brought an unexpected sense of closure. A few days after the trial, Eleanor called. "The DA has finalized the charges," she said. "Grace and Daniel are facing multiple counts. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted bribery. Daniel's cooperating so he might get a lighter sentence. But Grace," she hesitated. "She could be looking at 10 to 15 years. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it sink in. Grace had always been manipulative, but I never thought she'd fall this far. Her desperation had blinded her to the consequences, and now she was paying the price. "What about Daniel?" I asked. "He's agreed to testify against her," Eleanor replied. Not exactly the loyal husband she thought he was. The irony struck me. Daniel, who had plotted alongside her, was now turning on her to save himself. Poetic justice. As investigators dug deeper, more evidence surfaced. Grace had a long history of deception. Offshore accounts, fake ventures, fraudulent documents. She was a seasoned con artist. But she had made one fatal mistake, underestimating my father. His meticulous planning, the private investigators, the recordings, it had all come together to catch her in her own web. A week after the trial, Eleanor encouraged me to hold a press conference. "Control the narrative," she said. "Show them you're moving forward." Standing before a crowd of reporters, I began. My father was a man of integrity who believed in justice and hard work. His legacy was never about wealth. It was about values. While recent events have been difficult, they've reminded me of what truly matters: family, honesty, and resilience. I thank the court for honoring his wishes, and I will honor his legacy by continuing the work he started. I didn't take questions. There was nothing more to say. With the legal battle behind me, I focused on the estate. Walking its halls and gardens, I felt a deep peace. Every brick, every flower bed held memories of my father. But I didn't want to simply preserve his work. I wanted to build upon it. Eleanor and I sat down to plan. "What do you want to do with the land your father bought?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "I want to create a public garden, something beautiful, open to everyone. My father believed in sharing what he had. I think he'd love that," she smiled. "Harrison Gardens," she said. "It has a nice ring to it." Not long after, I received a letter from Grace. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting was shaky. "Thomas, I don't expect forgiveness. I was wrong about everything. Greed and pride destroyed what we had. Your father was a great man, and I failed to see that. I hope you find peace." I folded the letter and set it aside. It changed nothing, but maybe, just maybe, it meant she finally understood. Months passed. The land transformed into Harrison Gardens, a vibrant space filled with the flowers my father loved. Visitors came from all walks of life, drawn by its beauty. With every bloom, I felt closer to him. Eleanor and Isaiah, my cousin, stood beside me at the grand opening. "He'd be proud," Eleanor said softly. "I hope so," I replied. This is what he wanted. Not just justice, but growth. Grace and Daniel had tried to take everything from me. They failed. My father's legacy endured, stronger than ever. As the garden flourished, Isaiah approached me one day. "Maybe we can expand this," he said. "A community center, perhaps. A place for education, connection, support." His idea lit a spark. My father's legacy wasn't just about land or flowers. It was about giving back. I nodded. "Let's do it." Later, sorting through my father's study, I came across Grace's letter again. This time I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet closure. I placed it in a drawer, closing it in every sense. It was time to let go. The official opening of Harrison Gardens was blessed with sunshine. Families laughed, children played, bees hummed. Eleanor handed me a coffee. "You did it," she said. "We did it," I corrected. She raised her cup. "To Richard Harrison, a man who planned for everything." "To Dad," I said, "and to second chances." As the months rolled on, the garden grew beyond anything I had imagined. We added a cafe, a library nook, workshops on sustainability, and the community center. It became a place of peace, connection, and growth, a place where people could heal. One evening, I stood at the entrance looking at the plaque I had installed. "In loving memory of Richard Harrison, a man who taught us that even in the hardest soil something beautiful can grow." I traced the engraving, a lump rising in my throat. My father had protected his legacy and given me the tools to build one of my own. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something. This was my new beginning. Grace and Daniel were the past. Their schemes, just shadows. What mattered now was what I was building, one bloom at a time. The truth had come to light. Justice had been served. And at last, it was time to live.